Hello there, good morning. Welcome to S Solution. In our last video, we spoke about data types, arrays, and here we're talking about object data types. We are going through a JavaScript basic introduction, and we hope to move to solving algorithmic questions. If you're interested in such things, please do make sure to subscribe, to like, and share. Thank you. Let's get into the video now. Now, the object data types. What are the object data types? In JavaScript, it's a key value type per type, where we have a key and we have the value corresponding to that particular key. Just like in a dictionary, where you have, let's say a word, let's say house, and the house we have its value, which is the definition of the house. So when you are looking up what a house is, you check. You don't go to the definition first. You first pick up what you pick up the key, the word itself, which is house, and then you get the definition for that house. The object data type works in such a structure. Also, just like the arrays, the object data type can consist of any type of data. Can consist of numbers, can consist of strings, it can consist of objects, can consist of arrays. That is how the object data type is structured. Now, this is an important data structure type, and it's important you understand this. For example, when we are working with algorithms, we use hash maps, hash tables. All of these work on the basis of the object data type. When we want to do memorization, it has to do with object data type. You need to have an understanding of what an object data type is to be able to optimize your solutions in algorithms. Now, how do we declare an object data type? Now, basically, there are two approaches. The first approach is to use the object literals. Now, if you remember, in the array, you can also set up or declare an array using two ways: the array literal and the array constructs, using the new array keyword. Here in object data type also, there are two approaches: the object literal. Now, you must take note, the one difference when you are trying to declare them is that an array can be declared using a square bracket, while an object is declared using a curly bracket. Let me quickly just put that aside. So we have an array here, and it's a square bracket. It's set up with a square bracket, but we have an object here, and this is going to be set up with a curly bracket. So that is a very important difference between the two. So the let me make this bigger. Okay, so we have this, and the second approach is to use another object, is to use the new keyword, a new object keyword. So if I were to show us what the content of an object is here, we see that an object is just empty. There is nothing within it, but you see it's a curly bracket. That is very important. An array will be square bracket, while the other is another object. You see, both of them are just empty objects. So these are the two ways of setting up an object. I personally, I prefer to use the object literal. It's just easier to just put this than to be putting new object, but whichever way, it works fine, and it's all going to do the same thing basically. So those are the two approaches of uh, declaring, setting up your object. So how do we put data into our objects? How do we make our object contain values? How do we put whatever we want it to contain to be there? Two approaches. Now, the first approach is that when you set it up, for instance here, you put your values into it directly. So let's say name, we want a name property, and the name property is S solutions. Let's say the country property, Nigeria. Let's say number of channels property is one. Uh, um, a friendly property and true. So you see, it can contain strings, it can contain numbers, it can contain the boolean. And if you see here, an object contains all those things now because I have put them into it. So it contains a solution. We see it contains country, it contains property of number, channel, and it contains friendly. Now if you see, friendly is a boolean, number of channel is a number, country is a string, and name is a string. So it consists of all these data types. Now that is on one side. Now the other approach we could use in setting up our object is that when we have set up our object, which is empty here, you can put the property directly. So for instance, name, and we say the name is S solutions. We can say the country is Nigeria. The number of channels, so that's the other property, another object, number of channels, we have one, and then another object, and the friendly property is true. So if I were to come and show us what another object carries here, you see it's basically the same thing. Our name property, our country property. So if I show us here, so our name property is S solution, our country property is Nigeria, the number of channel is 1, and the friendly is true. Just the same as this when we set it up. So the difference is that in this one, in an object, we have already declared it. We have put our values, our property and values as we are declaring it. But here we declared it first, and then we put our properties into it. Whichever approach you like is fine, and that's that. Now with regards to this, there's also another way. So you could, instead of using square bracket, you could use the dots. So you can say dot another property, and then we could give it a value of let's say another. Now if I show us what another object is, you will find out that it has another property here, another property, and the value is what, another. So you can use the dots, these dots, and then whatever you want the property to be. What JavaScript will do, it will automatically add that value there. So for instance, you see another property wasn't here, but we just use the dot notation and it adds it to it. Now quick note here is that if I come and I say another object, and let's say I say dot name, and I change it to S, let's see what this will do. Remember, we already have name property already in another object. So let's see, when we add another name property, what do we get here? Another property called name. Because name already exists, it doesn't add the name. What it does, it updates whatever was in the name. So let me minimize this a little so we can see that. So previously, the object carried the value, the object property name carried the value of S solution, but we updated it here by using the same property name to S, and so it updated to S. So what this means is if an a property exists already within an object, it will not create another property with that name. What it will do, it will rather update that property. So that is how you can change the value of a property within JavaScript. You change it by setting it again. You can also do it by, let's say, want to change the friendly property, want to change it to false, and if we check another property here now, another object, I will check our friendly property is now set to false, although at the beginning it was set to true here. But because we are setting it again here, it understands, it's going to check, does it exist? It sees that it exists already. So what it just does is update the value there. So whatever was there, it changes it to true. And so our object becomes what? The friendly property becomes false. That's basically. So I've said when you want to add items, you can add it directly. When you're declaring, you can just put the values straight into it. The name, the location, the friends. Now that this is important now. In JavaScript, now if I want to, let me, so that doesn't make the screen too busy. Now let's say I come here and I say, okay, I want to add a property of number of friends, and I say, okay, number of friends, and I say he has 4 friends. You will see at this moment JavaScript is complaining. That is because you can't use the dot notation for a property that has space. So either you put underscore, that's one approach. You could use the underscore, and then when you want to check, sorry, when we check our value, we see that another object will contain number of friends with underscore there. That's one approach. But you can't have spaces. JavaScript will not have that. So the only way to go through this is for object properties that have spaces, you must use the square bracket approach. So that is, you will have to put it within a string. Now, JavaScript is okay with this. That's the only way you can have an object with spaces within it. So if you want to have an object property that has space in between the property names, then you must have to put it within a string, and you can't use the dot. So for instance, you can't come and say another object dot number of, no, it can't. This is not allowed in JavaScript. So let's take note of that. So as you saw here, when I was declaring the number of strength properties, because of the spaces, I put it within a string here, and that also plays it there too. When you are setting it up here, you can't, let's say I wanted number of channels to be this, I wanted it to be space, I can't put it in this way. I have to put it within a string. So number of channels has to be put in this way. So you see, number of channels, then we are okay. Number of channels is 1. But if I take this off, if it's not within the quotation mark, that is a string, it's going to complain. You see, JavaScript is complaining a number of channels, syntax unexpected token is complaining of this, that this off, there's a space between before it. It shouldn't be so. So one way to fix it is to put it within curly bracket, within quotation marks, or you remove the quotation mark and then remove the spaces altogether. Whichever way, it's all fine with JavaScript. So now, either we use this approach, or when we have set up our object, so here we set up the object using the object literal approach. After setting it up, we just put your properties into it. So dot name, solution, dot location, Nigeria. Here you now use, you see, you can use any approach. So you see here, use the bracket approach, and it puts friends, and it puts the value. Here it uses the dot approach, but Nigeria. But you see here, you can't use the dot approach for this because it is what is having space between it. So the number of friends is 4, but you cannot use the dot approach here because of the spaces. So as a rule of thumb for me, I don't bother using the dot approach. I prefer to use this square bracket approach because it can encompass every situation, unlike the dot approach where you can't only use it when there is no spaces in the property name. I hope that makes things clear. Now, how do we get our data? Now, in the same way that we put our data there, is basically the same approach. We get it. So remember, our an object contains of a name property, a country property, a number of channels property, a friendly property, another property, and a number of friends property. So let's say I want to get the name property. I could just say another object dot name, and that will give me. So if I were to come and show you, let me put this, let the name. So let me show you the name. So the name is what? S, and name is the value rather, so that I can just change this. Okay, so we can see that the value for name, it will go into the object and get the name property, and it will be what? S. And let's say, what if I wanted to get the country property? Country property is Nigeria. Let's say I want to get the number of channels, or another property. Remember, we have something called another property. So another property, if we check our object, another property, the value is what? Another. And what if I wanted to get number of friends? So I wanted to get number of friends. Number of friends. What do you people think will happen here? What do you think will happen here? Just like we cannot use the dot notation when we want to add a property that has spaces, we can also use it for property. So you can't even do this. You can't do this too. You see, this will give an error. So it has made Coca to crash. So let me copy this out here. Let me copy this out here. So when you want to get our object, you have to either use the square approach or the dot approach, but you can't use the dot approach when there is spaces. So you see, take note that you can't use the obj property approach if the property contains spaces. So for instance, obj dot number of friends will be wrong. So instead, what we should use is the square bracket approach, where we just put it in a string and it gives us that value. This is an important factor to note now. So this is basically how you access an object. So just like in the last adding data to the object, where I said I prefer to use the square bracket approach, even for accessing, I always prefer to use the square bracket approach, because whether it's a string, whether it's whether it's a string with spaces or without spaces, it accommodates it, unlike the dots approach, where you have to only use it when there is no spaces within it. So I just prefer to use the square bracket approach. You can use any approach, it's all going to work, but just know that when there is spaces, you cannot use the dots approach. Now, so some common methods we have in JavaScript objects: the object dot keys. Let's say we have an object. Let me just use that. So we have the object dot keys and the object dot values. The object dot keys is used to get. Now let me just show us this. On our Visual Studio Code, if you want to open a new session of Coca, we can use Ctrl Shift P. Now for the first time when you will use this, it will be required, you will not see Coca there, so you have to search. So you QUOKKA, and you will see things related to Coca. You should find a new JavaScript file option, and you click that. Subsequently, it will always be there at the top, provided you don't use another extension value there. So let's say one object, and let's set it up. So one object, value 1 contains value 1. One object, value 2, contains value 2. So if I come here and I say object, let me just put, if I come here and I say one object, object dot keys, keys, and I put my object, one object here. Let's see, what does that give us? Our values become what? Value 1 and value 2. What are value 1 and value 2? These are the keys in our object. Now if I show us what our object is, our object has okay, maybe I should remove this. Let me just put something here so that it makes more sense. Something and anything. So our value 1 is something and our value 2 is anything. So we find out that the key, this is a key, and this is a property, this is a value, so or key or property, this is another key, and this is another value. So when we use the obj.keys, it gives us all our keys together in one array. Subsequently, if I use the object dot, let me okay, I think I should have used keys here, and then let's use let values is objects dot, now dot values does the same thing, except that this now is for, it will give you the values. So it will give you all the values in an array. So something, anything. If you added another, let's say one object, uh, let's say just, and I told you can use a dot notation. So let's say one object dot value 3 is one thing. So you find out that value 3 is one thing, and in our keys we have value 1, value 2, value 3. In our values we have something, anything, one thing. So that is how this is a subtle trick you could use because you can't get the length of an object. So this is a trick I use in getting the length of an object. So you can't say one object dot length in JavaScript. There's nothing like this. So this is one approach I use when I want to get the what the content, how many items are within my object. It's a subtle trick I use to do that. So that's that. If you have any questions on what we've done, please drop the question in the comment section, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as possible. I know this video was quite long, but I hope it made sense to you and you were able to make sense out of it. And don't forget and always remember that the only way you can get better at anything, especially programming, is by doing it. So when you program, when you code, the more you code, the more you get better at it. There is no other way to get better at programming than by actually sitting down to write the program itself. Thank you, and see you in the next video. And please make sure to subscribe, to like, and to share.